San Antonio's water is disappearing, and the Edwards Aquifer may be dying right under the feet of more than 2 million people. This is not some faraway desert town running out of water. This is San Antonio, a major Texas city where the lakes are shrinking, rivers are fading, and one of the most important underground water sources in the region is under extreme pressure. Just outside the city, Medina Lake is almost gone. A lake that once held hundreds of thousands of acre-feet of water is now sitting at only 4% full. Boat docks hang over dry rock. Marinas sit far from the shoreline, and places that once looked like summer vacation spots now look like abandoned disaster zones. But here is the part that makes this even more terrifying. The water is not just vanishing because of drought. Some of it is being lost through a broken, century-old canal system before it ever reaches the people and farms that need it. So if the lakes are drying, the rivers are weakening, the canals are leaking, and the aquifer is being pushed harder every year. Are we watching a temporary water shortage, or the beginning of San Antonio's fight for survival? Medina Lake is disappearing in plain sight, and what is left behind does not look like a lake anymore. It looks like a warning. Drive west of San Antonio into the Texas Hill Country, and the first thing you notice is not the water. It is the silence. The kind of silence that should not exist around a place once filled with boats, families, engines, music, and summer crowds. This reservoir was supposed to be one of the great water anchors of the region. At full strength, Medina Lake could hold about 254,000 acre-feet of water. Its blue surface once stretched across thousands of acres. Marinas lined the shore. Vacation homes sat on the bluffs. Boat docks floated where children jumped into the water and families spent weekends under the Texas sun. Today, almost all of that is gone. Medina Lake is sitting at only 4% full. That means 96% of it has vanished. Not lowered, not weakened, vanished. The shoreline has pulled back so far that docks now hang over dry rock like broken bridges to nowhere. Boat ramps end in dust. Waterfront homes stare out at cracked earth instead of water. Places built for fishing, swimming, and summer tourism now look like they were abandoned after a disaster. And in some areas, the lakebed itself has become a graveyard. Old cars, rusting boats, forgotten debris. Things that were once hidden beneath deep water are now exposed under the brutal Texas sun. This is what makes the scene so disturbing. Medina Lake is not some tiny pond that dried up after one bad season. This was a major reservoir, a place that helped shape local life, local business, and the identity of entire communities around Lake Hills and the Medina River. People did not just visit this water, they built their lives around it. But now, the water is gone, and the damage is spreading far beyond the shoreline. The marinas are stranded, the businesses are fading. Property owners are watching the value and meaning of their homes collapse with the lake level. Farmers downstream are fighting for every acre-foot they can get. And San Antonio, just a short drive away, is being forced to look at a terrifying question that most growing cities do not want to ask. What happens when the water system everyone trusted starts failing? Because Medina Lake is not just a dried reservoir. It is the visible face of a much larger crisis. A crisis tied to drought, old infrastructure, shrinking rivers, leaking canals, and the growing pressure on the Edwards Aquifer. And the most frightening part is this. The lake did not simply dry up. Something is helping it disappear right now, underground. But here is the part that changes the whole story. Medina Lake is not just losing water to the sky. It is losing water into the ground. For years, people were told to look up, blame the drought, blame the heat, blame the missing rain. And all of that matters. Texas has been trapped in a brutal dry cycle. and the hill country has been watching rivers weaken month after month. But when residents around Medina Lake started following the water, they found something even more disturbing. The lake was being drained through a system built more than a century ago. Water released from Medina Lake is supposed to travel through a massive canal network and reach farmers downstream. On paper, that sounds simple. Water leaves the reservoir. Water flows through canals. Water reaches the fields. But the reality is shocking. A data expert working with local residents found that 3 out of every 4 acre-feet released from Medina Lake never reaches the farmers it is meant for. For every 4 units sent out, only 1 arrives. The rest disappears before it can water a single field. Not into homes, not into crops, into the dirt. The canal system stretches for hundreds of miles, but many parts of it are not modern concrete channels. They are old earthen ditches carved into the land, exposed to heat, roots, cracks, weeds, and broken liners. Some sections look less like water infrastructure and more like forgotten trenches. Off County Road 271, about 15 miles from the lake, you can see the problem with your own eyes. A canal cuts through the ground, several feet deep, overgrown with shrubs and small trees. A torn black liner lies crushed under limestone. The sides are rough. The bottom is exposed. And when water is poured into a channel like that, it does not rush forward like it should. It seeps. It sinks. It vanishes. That is the hidden disaster underneath the visible one. While families stare at dry docks and cracked lake beds, some of the remaining water is leaking away before it ever becomes useful. This is why the crisis feels so much worse than a normal drought. Rain can return. Storms can come. A lake can rise for a moment. But if the system carrying the water is broken, then every release becomes a race against the ground itself. Medina Lake is not only being emptied by weather, it is being emptied by time, neglect, and a canal network too old to protect what little water remains right now beneath San Antonio. And if that is true, the biggest question is terrifying. How do you save a water system that is leaking from the inside? The system behind Medina Lake was not built for a crisis like this. It was built for another Texas. A smaller Texas. A slower Texas. A time when the land west of San Antonio was shaped more by farms than subdivisions, and water planning did not have to answer to explosive population growth, extreme heat, and years of drought stacked on top of each other. The Bexar Medina Atascosa Water Control and Improvement District was created to move water from Medina Lake through a long canal system and deliver it to farmland downstream. At the time, it was an ambitious project. Water from the reservoir would travel through 300 miles of canals, feeding thousands of acres of agricultural land and helping turn dry fields into productive farms. But that system is now 100 years old, and it is being asked to survive conditions it was never designed to face. On paper, the district holds the right to draw up to 46,000 acre-feet of water from Medina Lake every year. That number sounds powerful. It sounds secure. It sounds like a system with room to breathe. But numbers on paper do not matter when the lake is nearly empty. With Medina Lake collapsing, the district could distribute only about 6,000 acre-feet to roughly 400 remaining farmers. And even that smaller amount was not safe from the leaking canals. Some of it disappeared before it reached the fields. Some of it sank into the same dry ground the system was supposed to overcome. Then the situation became too severe to ignore. The district halted water sales entirely. A moratorium was put in place. And for farmers who depend on that supply, it was not just a policy decision. It was a warning that the old system had reached a breaking point. This is what makes the crisis so dangerous. It is not just a drought story. It is an infrastructure story. It is a story about a water system built in the early 1900s being forced to carry the survival needs of the 21st century. Back then, No one designed these canals for a region with this much pressure, not this many people, not this much development, not this kind of heat, not a future where one reservoir could fall to 4% and be expected to support farms, communities, and a growing metro area. Every leak now matters. Every lost acre-foot matters. Every delay matters. Because when the lake is full, waste can hide inside abundance. But when the lake is dying, waste becomes disaster. And Medina Lake is exposing the terrifying truth beneath San Antonio's water future. The system is old, the pressure is new, and the water is running out. The most dangerous part of San Antonio's water crisis is not always the part people can see. Medina Lake is visible. Its empty shoreline is visible. The stranded docks, the cracked earth, the abandoned boats, the exposed lake bed. All of that can be photographed. All of that can be filmed. All of that shocks people because it looks like a disaster. But San Antonio's deeper fear is underground. Beneath the city and the hill country sits the Edwards Aquifer, one of the most important water sources in Texas. For generations, this aquifer has helped keep San Antonio alive. It has fed homes, businesses, neighborhoods, military bases, hospitals, schools, and millions of people who turn on a faucet and expect water to come out. But an aquifer does not scream when it is in trouble. It does not leave boats sitting in the mud. It does not show a cracked shoreline from the road. It does not make tourists stop and stare. It drops quietly, hidden under rock, soil, and city streets. And that is what makes it so terrifying. Because while Medina Lake shows the crisis above ground, the Edwards Aquifer shows the crisis underneath everything. When drought tightens its grip on the hill country, less water flows into rivers and recharge zones. When rivers weaken, less water can sink back underground. When heat rises, more water is pulled from the surface and from the soil. And when a fast-growing city keeps expanding, the demand does not slow down just because the rain disappears. This is the pressure building around San Antonio right now. The region is facing a brutal chain reaction. Medina Lake is nearly empty. The Medina River is struggling. Old canals are leaking. Farmers are getting less water. Communities around the lake are losing the resource they were built around. And beneath all of it, the aquifer is being asked to carry more of the burden. That is the part many people miss. When surface water fails, cities lean harder on groundwater. When reservoirs drop, underground sources become more important. When canals waste water, every other source becomes more stressed. So the collapse of Medina Lake is not separate from the fear around the Edwards Aquifer. It is connected to it. One system weakens, then the next system takes the hit. And this is happening in a region where more than 2 million people depend on water security every day. Not someday, not in some distant future, right now. The nightmare is not only that a lake is disappearing, the nightmare is that the water San Antonio cannot see may also be under pressure, and by the time everyone notices, the damage may be impossible to ignore. Then came the kind of storm that should have changed everything. After months of dry heat and falling water, the Texas Hill Country was hit by a powerful flood. Rain slammed into the watershed. Creeks rose fast. Water rushed through canyons. For a moment, it looked like nature was finally giving Medina Lake a second chance. This should have been the rescue. A lake sitting near disaster should have surged back to life. The empty coves should have started filling. The dry boat ramps should have touched water again. The marinas should have felt hope return with every inch of rising shoreline. But that is not what happened. Before the flood, Medina Lake had already fallen to a record low of about 2%. 2% of a reservoir that once held around 254,000 acre-feet of water. That is not low. That is collapse. That is a massive lake reduced to a shadow of itself. Then the rain came. A once-in-a-generation flood hit the region, the kind of event people remember for the rest of their lives. The kind of rainfall that should refill rivers, recharge land, and buy time for a desperate reservoir. And Medina Lake. Rise only to about 5%. 5%. After all that rain, after all that water, after the sky finally opened up, the lake was still almost empty. And within months, it slipped back down to around 4%. Think about what that means. The problem is no longer just that the region needs rain. The problem is that even when the rain comes, the system cannot hold on to enough water to recover. That is the terrifying shift in this crisis. Drought is dangerous because it slowly takes water away. But a broken water system is even more dangerous because it can waste the water when it finally arrives. Rain becomes temporary. Floods become brief relief. A reservoir rises for a moment, then starts bleeding back down. The failures are stacking on top of each other. The Medina River is low. The reservoir is nearly empty. The canal network is old and leaking. The district has halted water sales. Farmers are receiving only a fraction of what they need. Communities around the lake are watching their future shrink with the shoreline. And San Antonio keeps growing, adding more people to a region already under pressure. This is why the 4% number is so disturbing. It is not just a measurement, it is a warning signal. It says the lake can be hit by a major flood and still remain functionally empty. It says the old recovery pattern may be broken. It says the question is no longer just when the next rain will come. The real question is darker. Can this region still capture, move, and protect water fast enough to survive what is coming next? Because if a generational flood cannot save Medina Lake, then what exactly can? And that question now hangs over every dry canal, every riverbed, and every city tap today. For the people around Medina Lake, this is not a chart. It is not a water report. It is the sound of a business going quiet. In Lake Hills, the community was built around water. Summer weekends brought families, boats, fuel sales, rentals, fishing trips, and tourists who came because the lake was alive. The shoreline was not just scenery, it was the center of the local economy. Now the shoreline has moved away. Mike Crandall knows what that means. He helped build Wally's Water Sports, a marina made for a lake that could carry boats, families, and memories. But a marina without water becomes a monument to what used to be. Docks meant to float now sit stranded above rock and dirt. Walkways point toward empty space. The business model itself has been pulled out from under him, and he is not alone. All around the lake, residents are watching the same disaster from different windows. Waterfront homes no longer face water. Vacation cabins no longer feel like vacation cabins. Places once sold as lakefront dreams now stare at cracked ground, weeds, and exposed debris. For some families, the lake was their retirement plan. For others, it was their income, their customers, their weekends, their reason to stay. Downstream, farmers face their own version of the collapse. They depend on water releases that now barely exist, and when water is sent, too much of it is lost before reaching the fields. Crops do not wait for repairs. Livestock do not wait for meetings. A dry season becomes a lost season, and a lost season can become the end of a family farm. This is how a water crisis spreads. First, the lake drops. Then the tourists leave. Then the businesses weaken. Then property values fall. Then farms are cut off. Then trust breaks apart because everyone can see the problem, but no one can make the water come back. Medina. Lake is not just losing water, it is losing a way of life. And if a community built around water can watch its future disappear this fast, what happens when a city of millions faces the same reality? San Antonio is not the only place facing this warning. It is just one of the clearest places where the future is showing up early. Across the drying American West, communities are learning a painful truth. Water systems built 100 years ago were not designed for this climate, this heat, this population, or this level of demand. They were built in a different world, when rivers seemed more dependable, reservoirs seemed permanent, and growth felt like proof that the future would always have enough. That belief is now cracking. Medina Lake is the symbol because the damage is visible. You can see the empty basin. You can see the docks hanging in the air. You can see the canals cut through the dirt, still carrying water through places where the ground steals it before people can use it. It looks local, but the warning is much bigger. This is what happens when three disasters meet at once. Drought removes the supply. Old infrastructure wastes what remains. Growth keeps increasing demand. Individually, each problem is dangerous. Together, they become a slow-moving collapse. And this is why San Antonio's crisis matters far beyond Texas. The city depends on a region where surface water is failing, underground water is under pressure, and old delivery systems are losing water before it reaches the people who needed it. That is not just a shortage. That is a system under attack from every direction. The Edwards Aquifer makes the warning even more serious. It is the invisible reserve, the hidden lifeline, the water source people do not think about every time they turn on a faucet. But when visible reservoirs shrink and rivers weaken, more pressure moves underground, more wells, more pumping, more demand placed on a source that cannot be replaced by hope. This is the brutal lesson of Medina Lake. The question is no longer only whether the drought will break. The question is whether the system can survive long enough for rain to matter. Because rain alone cannot fix broken canals. Rain alone cannot rebuild trust. Rain alone cannot undo decades of growth, waste, delay, and pressure. If water arrives but the system cannot hold it, then the crisis keeps moving. Today, it is Medina Lake at 4%. Tomorrow, it could be another reservoir, another aquifer, another city that believed water security was guaranteed. The American West is being forced to face a future where water does not simply disappear in one dramatic moment. It disappears through cracks, through dry rivers, through leaking canals, through decisions postponed year after year. And if San Antonio is seeing the warning signs, how many other cities are closer to zero water than anyone wants to admit? Medina Lake is still sitting near empty, and the warning has not gone away. The docks are still hanging in the air. The boat ramps still end in dust. The lake bed still stretches out where deep water used to shine under the Texas sun. In the canals, the same old trenches still cut through the land, carrying what little water remains through dirt, cracks, roots, and broken liners. The limestone is still baking white in the heat. The moratorium is still in effect. And the people who live there are still waiting for answers that have not arrived. But Medina Lake is only the part of the crisis people can see. The deeper fear is beneath San Antonio itself. The Edwards Aquifer is the invisible lifeline. It is the water source millions depend on without thinking about it. It is under streets, homes, businesses, schools, hospitals, and neighborhoods where every faucet feels normal until the day it does not. Above ground, a reservoir can scream for attention when it drops to 4%. Underground, the danger builds in silence. That is what makes this moment so serious. This did not happen in one storm. It did not happen in one hot summer. It happened slowly, through drought that refused to break, through rivers that weakened, through canals that leaked, through growth that never slowed, and through decisions that were easier to delay than confront. The water did not vanish all at once. It disappeared acre-foot by acre-foot. It disappeared into cracked earth. It disappeared through old infrastructure. It disappeared from a lake that could not recover, even after floodwater came rushing through the hill country. And now, every loss drop points toward the same question. How long can a growing city keep trusting a system that is already showing signs of failure? San Antonio is not out of time yet. But the warning is no longer distant. It is sitting in an empty lake bed west of the city. It is written across stranded docks and dry canals. It is hidden in the pressure building beneath the ground. And it is spreading across a region where more than 2 million people still live, as if the water will always return. That belief is becoming more dangerous every year. Because if Medina Lake can fall this far, if old canals can lose so much, if even major rain cannot reset the system, then the crisis is not just about water levels, it is about survival. And the next question may not be how low the lake can fall. It may be how long San Antonio can keep going before the water it depends on disappears for good, right beneath its feet, forever, silently.